On the eve of the 20th anniversary of Slovenia's accession to NATO, we invited Professor Wolfgangom Streeckom to speak about NATO and the involvement of NATO countries into current conflicts, particularly Ukraine and Israel. I welcome you, Professor Streeckom, and I thank you for accepting our invitation. Your two recent articles, Means of Destruction and Master and Servant, which I highly recommend, offer critical perspectives on the so-called Western defense of democratic values in these conflicts. Before we continue, I would like to point out that the event with the distinguished guest today commemorates the referendum campaign against NATO, in which the Peace Institute participated together with other institutions and supporters 20 years ago. During the campaign, the Peace Institute published the book No to NATO, Give Us a Break. This is this book. In the foreword, Gorazd Kovačič, a sociologist, wrote a prophetic message. It reads as follows. The question of joining NATO is above all a question of the role of war and the military apparatus in the world and in Slovenia. The decision for or against Slovenia's accession to NATO is a strategic question of alignment with one order or another, a choice between vassalage to the New World Order and the pursuit of peaceful coexistence and independent development for all. End of quotation. My question is, are we not living in this critical conflict between two world orders, one of which is disappearing and the other has not yet been born? But let's go back in time again. Among the campaigners were economists who supported the gradual transition to capitalism in the early 1990s and opposed the shock therapy. In the mid-90s, strong trade unions contributed to the establishment of the neo-corporativist social development and the Slovenian social model. The words are of the British scholar MIR. I mention this because you can understand the importance of this achievement, given that, Professor Streeckom, your primary research interest is industrial relation. You have written many books which are all must-reads in this research field. In your work, you have dealt with the restructuring and the decline of industrial democracy. So you can sympathize with the Slovenian economist who 20 years ago commented on security issues and military threats in the same book, No to NATO, Give Us a Break. He said, the most important collective security in Slovenia is a competitive economy and social stability. By this, he meant the alliance between the capitalist and the worker who prosper in a kind of Rhineland capitalism. Had he read your work, he would have known that Rhineland capitalism was a mirage even then. However, the Slovenian social model was more at risk than the economists could have imagined. A few years later, the financial crisis turned things upside down. It initially manifested itself as over-indebtedness in the private sector. Public debt, on the other hand, was 26% of GDP at the beginning of the crisis, but rose to 81% by the end of the crisis. It follows that the private debt was transformed into public debt. This was the result of a new colonial position of Slovenia within the European structure. The best example of this is the state bailout of the banks. Although the famous Troika had no official mandate in Slovenia, it nevertheless directed the government's actions. Under its dictate, the state had to inject huge amounts of capital into the banks so that when they were sold under pressure, the buyers of these banks were able to repay investments in very short time. There was no compensation for the state bailout. On the contrary, the government had to take austerity measures and the Slovenian social model was brought to its knees. You are co-editor of the book Politics in the Age of Austerity, published in 2013, and know the context. You may wonder what this has to do with NATO. I will explain now. At that time, international pressure was exerted to limit the political power of the people through referendums. In 2013, a constitutional amendment banned referendums on budget issues and many other topics. Interestingly, defense was also included, so that the people can no longer vote on national defense issues. This shows the intertwining of economic and military dominance. The political party, the left, experienced this blockade when it tried to stop rising military spending in 2020 and in early 2022. The second attempt was stopped by the Constitutional Court. Social forces opposed to militarism and rising military spending therefore face more obstacles and less political freedom than before joining the NATO. In the 20 years of NATO membership, the Slovenian armed forces have participated in controversial military operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and many other countries. Moreover, NATO membership also failed in pragmatic benefits of joining NATO. Before accession, NATO supporters spoke of greater security and lower defense spending. In 20 years, none of these promises have been fulfilled. The cost of armaments have risen by 70% in the last 3 years alone, and people feel less and less secure in NATO. But it is even worse. Information from today is that the government does not categorically oppose the deployment of NATO nuclear weapon on the Slovenian territory. Now, I would like to ask you, Professor Streeck, the first question. I don't expect you to explain the situation on the Slovenian referendum. So let's start with the first general question. What do you think NATO stands for today?
Thank you, first of all, for your truly excellent introduction into the subject. Well, you see, NATO today is an animal that is very different from what it was before 1990, before the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, it was explicitly dedicated to territorial defense of the homelands of the NATO countries in the West. Now, after I think 1999, the NATO Charter actually dedicates NATO not just to territorial defense, but also to out-of-area operations all over the world. And it is absolutely clear that these operations are not operations on behalf or decided upon by the Slovenian government. It is the sort of an extension of the American global aspirations after the 1990s, especially under the second Bush, which was about a new world order under American dominance. This is where NATO today fits in. It's no longer purely defensive, or it has an idea of defense which is global and means basically the interests of the now leading capitalist nations, which is the United States. Now, add to this that NATO before 1990 was embedded in a system of arms control agreements between the Soviet Union and the United States. All of these agreements have been cancelled by the United States after the year 2000. They simply do not exist anymore. There's no sort of arms control element anymore around NATO. The first decade of the 2000s was a time of enormous increase in military spending in the United States to a level to 1.5 times of what it was at the high point of the Cold War. I'm saying that in order to show that this is absolutely a different animal. Add this, as you mentioned at the end of your introduction, add to this that the United States have aggressively used NATO countries, in particular the former East European NATO countries, as stationing places for very sophisticated new arms. As you say, including the intention to station nuclear arms, as they have to a very large extent on German soil. So they are already there. It's not that they need to be especially taken to Europe. And finally, I would say, there's one other thing that one needs to know about NATO today. It is named by the concept of interoperationability. All the militaries of NATO countries have to be redesigned in such a way that they fit into a global division of labor organized and commanded by NATO headquarters in Brussels, which is basically an extension of the American Defense Department. That means that a country that joins NATO loses its control over the structure of its armed forces and over the deployment of its armed forces, because they can do only particular things still, and these must fit into the overall NATO machinery. So I could say a few more things, but I don't want to speak too much on this issue. The important thing is that NATO today is in no way a defense, territorial defense system for the countries that join NATO. The other way around it is, the countries that join NATO become an extension of a global military apparatus, which is commanded out of the State Department of the United States.
Thank you very much for this. In Europe, the discussion about NATO mainly revolves around the war in Ukraine, which we were dragged into. I recall the open letter of March 2022, signed by more than 163 Nobel laureates protesting against the unprovoked war. In your text, you wrote about the historical context, pointing out that the war did not come out of nowhere. How would you comment on the assumption of unprovoked war?
Yeah, see, no war is ever a war is a station in a long sequence of interaction between different parties, where there are usually all sorts of sort of points where the trajectory that leads to military engagement could be left, and you could do things to prevent it. Wars are not unprovoked in a technical sense, and they have to do with the action. Let's say there are always two parties that are needed for a war, not just one. And the two parties, like in a failing marriage, they are both involved in it. Now, in the case of the Ukrainian war, from the 1990s onwards, it was clear to everyone in the world that Ukraine would be a central location for a conflict over the future role of Russia in the New World Order after the end of the Cold War. The Russians had signaled throughout the 1990s and well after the coming to power of Vladimir Putin in 1999, they had continued to signal that they would, with very great resistance, accept the accession of former Warsaw Pact nations to NATO and to the European Union, with one exception, and that exception was to be Ukraine. You know the geography of Eastern Europe better than I do. It is absolutely clear that this country sort of borders at Russia at a point where there are only, I think, 500 miles to Moscow. And I remember that in the months and in the year and in the months that up to the beginning of the war, the Russians, you can say about them what you want, but the Russians were sort of eager to talk to the United States about the following question: what would happen if Ukraine would join NATO and the European Union? What would happen to their military posture, especially whether in an alliance between the United States and Ukraine, the United States would insist on deploying mid-range nuclear missiles in Ukraine or not? And the answer to this was that the United States will never negotiate about what NATO country. They considered this as their primary right to decide what to station there and what not. It was absolutely comparable to the Russian attempt to deploy nuclear missiles in Cuba in the 60s. And it was clear that Russia could not accept that. That they, I think even in the negotiations that extended even after the beginning of the war in Istanbul, I think I remember. Russia didn't want a war. They wanted some security guarantees that this country would not be a stationing place for NATO. They didn't get them. And I think they didn't get them because on the Western side, they made a dramatic miscalculation, which was that with the sanctions that they were preparing, economic sanctions that they were preparing against Russia, Russia would be broke within a matter of half a year if it engaged in a war in Ukraine. And therefore, it would be simple to force them to accept whatever terms the United States would want to impose on them. And I must say, looking back at this was, I think, one of these sort of tragic miscalculations that happened before wars, when a national elite is overconfident in its own capacity. Now it is Western Europe that is suffering economically, not Russia, and it is Russia that has built up a military capacity, especially industrial sort, which nobody ever expected. So unprovoked war is a term that has nothing to do in its story. It is a long discussion about basically whether the West would take advantage of the internal tensions of Russia as a state in order to advance closer and closer to the capital of Russia, which is Moscow. And then maybe at the end of this, I would say the following: when Zelensky was elected, he was elected by I think 3/4 of the population of the electorate in Ukraine on a platform that was basically the Minsk Agreement, neutralization of Ukraine, postponement of the Crimean issue until the next sort of 10 years, and see then what happens. And so some sort of autonomy for the Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine. And then suddenly this disappeared. It was forgotten. And if I have a hunch, knowing from politics of the United States, that after the disastrous exit of the United States from Afghanistan under the new president Biden, in the following fall, Biden thought he could not afford, after this disaster, if you remember these pictures when the plane took off and all of this, he could not afford, for domestic political reasons, to be reasonable in the negotiations with Russia over Ukraine. He had to show that he still was the strong part. Now they are all seriously trying to understand that this war cannot be won on the Ukrainian terms, and the Western elites just don't know what to do.
Thank you. Russian imperialism is a justification for blocking peace negotiations, supplying arms to Ukraine, increasing military budgets, etc. Since 2022, this topic has been heavily ideologized in academic writings and the media. How would you comment on this?
See, imperialism...
This is an important question. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
See, imperialism is a difficult concept. It can include many different things. So, for example, there's a sort of defensive imperialism, which tries to secure the immediate environment of a great power or even of a larger state by making sure that these surrounding nations do not become a stationing ground for a rival empire, an aggressive empire, which is about dissolving the complexity of a multinational state into smaller states that can be easily governed by the rival. So there are defensive and aggressive sort of this. In the case at hand, one has to understand, looking at international relations today, that there is no way the United States can ever be subject to aggressive imperialism by another nation. They sit on a huge island, the size of a continent, with only two neighboring states. One is Canada, which is basically the 51st state of the United States, and one is Mexico, which is deeply penetrated by the American military. Yeah? In this situation, basically the United States can do in the world whatever they want without ever suffering the consequences if things go wrong. Try to imagine, sort of as a thought experiment, that after they had lost the war in Iraq, the Iraqi fleet, navy, sort of go to the United States, up to the Chesapeake Bay, release Iraqi navy going to Washington and asking George W. Bush to be extradited to Iraq so that he could be taken as a war criminal to the court in Den Haag. That is, if the United States were a normal country losing a war, that could actually happen. And where would be a good place, a better place for George W. Bush than the prison of the International Criminal Court in Den Haag? Really impossible. Whereas on the other side, our German foreign minister, formidable Frau Baerbock, sort of seems to be dreaming of the moment when the German army, or together with the American army, let's call it the NATO army, gets a hold of Vladimir Putin and takes him Den Haag to stand trial in a prison. Yeah? So there is this unbelievable asymmetry in this game, which has to be taken into account if we talk about rivaling imperialism. One imperialism is very different from the other. Now you may think that it's a good idea to sort of take Russia apart into pieces. I'm neutral about this because I know that the Russian state will never accept this, and that you can do this only with unbelievable sacrifice of life and limb, which we would, as Europeans, rather not to engage in. Yes. So for us, the problem is how can we pacify this situation in a way that allows us and our children to survive in prosperity, while at the same time preventing these two powers to get at each other's throats in this asymmetrical way that it would be if it would happen.
Thank you. The media have played a key role in shaping the debate about NATO and the war in Ukraine. If I may refer to NATO survey, it shows a significant distrust that the media is reporting the truth about the invasion of Ukraine. In 2022, the average percentage of respondents who trusted the media was 54 for all NATO countries. In Slovenia, the percentage was 37, even much lesser. But the question was no longer asked in the latest survey, probably for good reason. Are the media complicit in the war propaganda?
They always are. And
Yes.
and they are sort of, in a sense, necessary, and one can even understand this. Wars are about killing and dying. They are a very serious matter. And for governments, as soon as a war has begun, information on what is going on the front line, and on the justification or non-justification of the war effort becomes a weapon. And governments have a capacity to enlist the elites of their country. And normally the media are controlled by members of the elite of the country. To enlist them in the war effort as allies, trying or helping the government to hold the front at home together, to make people feel confident about what the government is doing. So, for example, now I think in Ukraine they have only one television channel left, and the newspapers all receive their material from the president's office, because the oligarchs that own the media are still at this point supporting the Ukrainian government. They may no longer at some point, as they begin to learn that Ukraine cannot, especially the Americans have withdrawn from the game. See, one of the very important moments with very, very little reporting in the media was 2 weeks ago, when this woman, Victoria Newland, sort of was fired from the state. She was the neocon bridgehead in the American administration, both under Obama and under Trump. So she even survived under Trump. And Biden, always in charge of Ukraine. And she was the one who, in this telephone conversation that was overheard, said this thing, which I won't repeat because I'm a well-educated Central European. But that woman now is gone, which to me signaled that there was a very important change in the American administration. Mainly, the Americans always do when things go wrong. They just go away and as to others. Yeah. As far as the media is concerned, if they would have really reported on the significance of this event, they would have to tell the audience that continuing a war for the war objectives that are now still the official objective has become an impossible mission. Impossible. In that sense, they are all desperately trying to keep the media in line, so that the real situation of this war is not known to the population.
Slovenia is a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. According to the head of the Slovenian delegation, its task is to, I quote here, educate non-European members about the reality of the war on the ground, end of quotation, which presumably means that non-European members are not capable to form their own opinion. This is one of many signs of a growing divide between the West and the global South.
Yeah.
How would you comment on this?
There's very little to say about this. It is like they will have to learn, that the world is now a multipolar world and no longer a bipolar world, in which, as far as we are concerned, only one side counts and the other can be discounted. Now there are more actors in this world than just two, and we're doing our best to discredit these other voices, partly by telling us ourselves that they don't know much about the world as it really is, and only we do. But we will learn that this is, as you say, a sort of European arrogance and European American arrogance, Western arrogance, which will not be sustainable, not even for a long time, in the next couple of years. After the Palestinian war, of the United States and of the West as a whole will be nil. It will be totally destroyed. And I wonder how our German foreign minister will be able to travel to any place in the world after this, after the reality of this mass murder in the Gaza Strip will have become visible to the eyes of the world. It is now it is almost not. You only see very few parts of it because our media don't show. Yesterday, I think on the German national television, the daily news show, there was this woman reporter on a plane that the flying over Gaza, where our German army sort of dispensed these ridiculous collections of food on a how do you say when they throw them down from the plane to
the food or the they were throwing out. Sorry, it was interrupted for a moment. They were throwing food aid for the Palestinians in Gaza Strip.
Yeah, from the plane, and they had a camera. They showed how the thing was thrown from the plane, and then the camera caught the ground below the plane, and you saw a huge cloud of fire and dust rising from. And she said, "Ah, there's an Israeli operation." Unbelievable. Yeah, I don't know how these people will live after the reality, the truth of this thing has come out. How they will have the brazenness to continue to say that they are journalists and not propaganda.
You initiated this with your foreign minister, and with the next question, I would like to move to Germany. I found it very interesting in your recent articles, Means of Destruction and Master and Servant, where you have shown the subjugation of German military spending to the political and military interests of the USA. In one case, purchase of fighter bombers carrying American nuclear bombs, and delivery of submarines to Israel, also for carrying nuclear arms. Germany has increased military spending by 100 billion euros in 2022 and announced a further 200 million euros for 2024. In this article, Means of Destruction, you explained that this is the preparation for the confrontation between USA and China, where Germany and other NATO countries would be auxiliary help. Are you still convinced in that interpretation?
See, the extent of opportunism on the part of national elites cannot be overestimated. It is so. They say all sorts of things. So they say, yeah, we're spending 100 million and 100 billion, sorry, and then we spend 200. It's all empty talk. They don't know where the money is. They are desperate to find the money for these things. Take, for example, in Germany, the railways are breaking down because of lack of investment. There's all sorts of things happening, and no, it's just empty talk. Whether they're able to actually do that is a very different question. The Americans certainly want Germany to take over their role in the Ukraine conflict, and that means to put in the money that now the Americans are putting in, because they won't pay anymore, which is typical, as I said, typical of the United States. If something goes wrong, they just leave it the way it is, because they never suffer any consequence. They can be absolutely. They just don't have to be responsible. Yeah, they cannot be made responsible. Now, Germany, since the end of the Second World War, the United States have a sort of right in treaties that are not completely known to the public to station American troops on German soil. Now they have roughly 40,000 troops, plus families. They have one of the largest military airports in the world in southwestern Germany. The command center that they used to organize the war on terror globally. Also, they used that same place to bring in these prisoners that they collected and then took to Guantanamo. So Germany is sort of an extended workbench of the American military. The Americans have an unknown number of nuclear warheads in Germany. Then, many years ago, they sort of told the Germans, they were sort of slightly concerned about what happens to these warheads, that they would make a deal with them the Germans buy planes that the Americans certify as capable of carrying American. Of course, those planes can be bought only in the United States, of course. Otherwise, they don't get certified. And then Germans would be allowed to carry these nuclear bombs to targets in Russia, but only on American command. And Germans call this nuclear participation. It's a very strange concept of participation. Now our foreign minister, when they entered in this now governing coalition, she insisted that nuclear participation should be upgraded, not just these sort of slow things that they have now. And they have committed to buying 35 F-35s. Why 35 F-35s? I don't know, but in order to, you can remember the number, but absolutely expensive. And these are the most advanced American fighter planes on bomber planes that are not yet even fully designed, fully operated. They are the sort of successors to the F-16. We will soon begin to use the F-35s as fighter to find out how we can deliver nuclear bombs to Russia. It's unbelievable. It beats imagination.
And at the same time, the Germany financed the development of new fighters.
With France, the FCAS, which is the Future Combat Air System, which the Germans are sort of slightly skeptical about, because the French always have these wonderful technological dreams and then they don't come true. The FCAS is a combination of satellites, drones, and fighter bombers, operative around the globe, coordinated out of one place, where these three things work together to do wonderful things that you can do by destroying human lives and human habitations. And actually, now the French are sort of concerned about Germans buying the F-35 because they may not have enough left to invest in the FCAS, which doesn't even exist yet. But we tell them, don't worry, someone will find the money, and we've already sort of paid enormous money into this project. No, it's absolutely unbelievable. And I say there's a sort of threat, I mean dreadful irresponsibility in the behavior of our governments and military elites in engaging in these incredible projects designed to destroy the world. They are all eager to be part of it. Yeah.
I will go to the next question. A member of Bundestag, Sarah Wagenknecht, has left Die Linke last year and founded the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance. Its founding manifesto from January 224 problematizes rising military spending and the escalation of war, the pressure of rising energy prices on the economy, social hardship, etc. The manifesto calls for an end to the just peace formula and immediate negotiations and demand. But Sarah Wagenknecht is not attacked for this, but for her stance on migration, for which she is portrayed as the left wing of the alternative for Germany. How do you explain this? What significance does the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance have in Germany and in Europe?
we'll see. There are the European elections coming up, and that's the first test of the city to actually win in an election, not just in East Germany, but in the rest of Germany as well. I'm a supporter of the 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐥𝐢𝐭𝐢 alliance because she's the only one who really seriously tells the voters disastrous consequences will be if we continue on this green militarist idea of foreign policy. Yeah. It's very important that, in my view, that the elections show that there is a basis for a convinced and intelligently conceived opposition to this warlike posture that Germany is taking on, or has been taking on since the so-called Zeitenwende. Now, calling for negotiations doesn't mean that Germany will negotiate on behalf of the West, because we can't. The Russians, waste of time. The Russians need to talk to the Americans, and the Americans need to talk to them. Our role will have to be to begin to convince the Western alliance that the way things are, this war can be stopped or frozen and then slowly transformed into something like peace, only when the Americans are willing to do this. Are they? We don't know. We have to be very explicit that this is our demand on our ally, as long as they are our allies, to do this for us. The 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐥𝐢𝐬 is very clear on this, that if at all, and we are not optimists, but we have to do our best, if at all there can be some sort of peaceful solution to the Ukrainian conflict, then there has to be a ceasefire, and then serious negotiation between the United States and Russia, along the lines of what was negotiated in Istanbul, negotiations that were ended by, I think, Boris Johnson coming in and telling the Ukrainians that they can have everything and they can have it in half a year, because we will crush the Russian economy. As far as immigration is concerned, we do have a serious immigration problem, in the sense that if you want to bring down the vote for AfD, then you have to do something on the regulation of immigration. AfD is a product of Merkel's immigration policy in 2015. They were very small before that. Now they are growing, now one might want to think, would it not be a fine world, a great, we could go to a place like Germany, and Germany had open borders, but you have to imagine the problem in the healthcare system, in the school system, in housing. We have a housing shortage for low-income people, already for Germans, and now you have 1 million immigrants also need to be housed. In a country like Germany, you cannot simply say that we don't care whether these kids that they bring will get a decent education. We will have to provide for it. It is obviously clear that you cannot from one day to the next expand the basic school system by 50%, which in some states, parts of the country, it has to be 80%. 80% more teachers, more room, more school, and so on. So some sort of regulation of immigration is necessary. And our present political elite has chosen the easy way, which is to pretend that they want to invite in immigration, but at the same time trying to force the European Union to close the borders not around Germany, but around the European Union. And in Greece, they know. And at the same time, they pretend that they are sort of the decent people by as obviously xenophobic. Yeah, but xenophobia is spreading among people who vote for the AfD because they don't see any serious effort on the part of the governing party to do something to regulate immigration. So that's our problem. And anyone who wants to push the AfD back to where they were before 2015 will have to have a serious solution to how to integrate immigrants at a number that the country can take.
Mm. Does it mean more investment also in social state, education, health system?
Yeah, education, health system is absolutely central. You can imagine people come from Syria and they are not in very best shape. They need to go to the dentist. They need to go here and there. Our school system, Germany is always thought to be a rich country. Our school system is already sort of extremely mediocre. If you look at the OECD statistics, because we haven't invested in it. Now you get more and more children who at age 6 or 7 cannot speak a single word of German. And they are in the same class as the children of the German population. And this would cause conflict in every country in the world. Yeah.
Mm. We are running out of time. I would like to finish our conversation with your professional interest, which is in political economy from an institutional perspective. In your numerous books, you have dealt with institutional change in Germany and elsewhere. I'm therefore interested in how the current state of war is affecting industrial relations in general and the organizing of a workforce in particular. We have heard nothing from employers' associations, even though their membership has been severely affected by the war, rising price of energy and so on. And we have heard nothing from the trade unions, neither on the Ukraine crisis nor on the Gaza. On the contrary, for instance, we've seen protests in America organized by American unions, including the United Automobile Workers, who have organized protests to end the genocide in the of the Palestinians. How do you are an expert in this field, so I'm really curious how you see the situation.
Yeah, it's on the part of industry. I think they are still they are very, very nervous and about the future of German industry. But before they take to the public, they are trying to talk to the government, and they now feel that the Greens have become central supporters of the interests of German industry. So subsidies are so beginning to be spread all over the place. They also don't trust the Christian Democrats to be better for them than the Greens. There's a general sense of the political system not being very good at mastering the present crisis. As far as the unions are concerned, it is you see a lot of trade unionists writing open letters against the war in Ukraine and also in Palestine, but they are all retired. they are not active. Germany is a strange society, and there are pressures for conformism also on the science system. In a country like Britain or the United States, this would be conceivable that, for example, with respect to Palestine, there was an international open letter by parliamentarians from different countries. So 200 Canadians, 150 Americans, 200 Italians, 6 German. 6
parliamentary deputies.
Yeah. 6 Germans signed the letter. All from the Zaharan group. And we will have, as sociologists, we will have to do some serious work. I'm trying to put this together as an agenda. Some serious work to understand this almost incredible, unbelievable country right now is being pressured into a kind of support for the Israeli government that is even no longer present in the United States. We're now the only country in the world who, in the words I have to mention our foreign minister again, she is calling for a humanitarian break, a pause in humanitarian break, like she was concerned that when they get killed, they would even have at least had something to eat before. This is like Netanyahu, like Netanyahu's press speak. No, I think there is some serious work to be done to understand how this society operates.
If we are speaking about the conformism, it's not a disease, it's a pandemia, word pandemia, I think. Yeah, we notice it here and in every country, as my friends inform me. I'm very looking forward to the next work. You announced this meticulous analysis, and I hope we will have a next interview. We opened a lot of debates about the public debt, crisis of social state, and so on. So I'm looking forward maybe for the next interview on the more pleasant topics like this one.
Come back in a year, and I will maybe have put these things in one picture. But it's so complex.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you for having me, and I wish your institute all the best.
Thank you.